Okay, this video is on formal and informal quoting and references, specifically having to do with our Things Fall Apart paper, our final paper. Want to make sure that we can remember that we are supposed to do with the formal and informal quotes. So this is just a review. You guys should already know this, but let's just make sure that we know the basics behind the essay, and mainly emphasize the quoting because that's really where the important meat and potatoes of the points are in this essay. So anyway, start off with what's in an essay about literature? That would be a good question. And when we look at an essay about literature, we're going to have all kinds of components. But one of the first things is that there's only very specific things in it. And in our introduction, for instance, and all of the introductions are all going to be the same, somewhat. In this one, I haven't read the actual prompt, but we're going to get to that in a second. Just watch. As humans, we all fear something, and we deal with those fears in ways that match our personalities. In Lord of the Flies, William Golding shows the fears of Jack, Ralph, and Piggy, and chooses specific ways for each to deal with his fears. Therefore, each of the three boys reacts to fear in his own unique way. Okay, so it sounds like this paper is on fear. Let's see what the prompt was. The purpose of a literary analysis essay is to closely examine some aspect of literary work. In this essay, the student analyzes the fears felt by the characters. Okay, so they mention right away, this is what my focus is going to be on. I really like the second sentence. In Lord of the Flies, William Golding shows the fears of Jack, Ralph, and Piggy and chooses specific ways for each to deal with his fears. Makes it all very clear in one sentence. In our case, we want some sort of a statement. We know what our focus is. Why does the novel end the way it does? And we know that this is a cause and effect type of structure we're going to be seeking. What caused the ending, right? So we're going to be going back and we're looking at other parts of the novel in order to figure out what had to do with the ending. This is a two-page type double-space minimum, no real maximum. Okay, so in that one, you're going to be mentioning the prompt in some manner, having to something. It has to have some mentioning of the prompt. Why does the book end the way that it does? It also has to have your statement. What is your statement? It ends that way because of. Okay, this focus on this paper and a different work for the Lord of the Flies is on fear. What's your focus on? What is the main reason? What is the main focus? What is it that drives the ending? And see if you can, maybe you can see that all of the characters lead towards that ending. There's one thing that motivates them all. Or maybe all the characters that go to one ending or one type of ending in this work are all motivated by one thing, and all the characters that go to a different ending in this work are motivated by something else. What we were trying to find that pattern. What is it? And that's a discovery thing. And once we've discovered it, we put it in one sentence in the introduction. For that reason, we always have to revisit the introduction after we've completely finished our paper and we've learned what we were supposed to learn, and then we go back and we put it in one sentence in the introduction as a clear statement so that the reader knows what the rest of it's about. All introductions are going to be like this then. We're going to restate the prompt and we're going to talk about our specific stance. Okay? And if it's a complicated or a larger one, we're going to probably look for some sort of an organizational map of what the argument's going to be. If you've got a 4-step argument, it's because A, B, C, and D. Then A, B, C, and D should probably be listed just as briefly as possible in the introduction. And then they get expanded, each one of them. A gets expanded in the first body paragraph, B gets expanded in the second body paragraph, C in the third, and D in the fourth, and then it gets concluded. So The concept is that it's a map. That's the only three real elements of the introduction. So is the restate the prompt, make our statement, and if it's a big paper where it's complicated, then we're going to have a map. And if it's not, if it's small, if it only has one little focus, then it's not going to be mentioned. This is a 2-page paper. You can get away with not having an organizational map in it. If you get to a 10-page paper, you're going to need one. Here's parts of an introduction. Just one place. It's got some examples, introduction, good ideas of introduction rules that you can follow. You're always going to introduce your topic. You're always going to indicate the structure, and you're always going to have some sort of a thesis statement or what is the point of your paper. It's funny how I use slightly different terms, but we come to exactly the same thing. This one's from a well-known writing. This is a writing services place, but you're going to see that in all of the introductions. Next, we're looking at the body paragraphs. Most body paragraphs have got like a topic sentence. They can call it a lot of different things, different terms, but there's some sort of a thing at the very beginning that focuses the rest of the paragraph. This paragraph is going to be focused on the fears of the first boy, Jack, right? And he believes that a beast does exist. And it's going to talk about him and how he's afraid of it, and it's going to talk about him and how he deals with his fear. And it's going to show his fear through and his way of dealing with it through a quote. So as we see the quote that they picked, we're strong, we hunt, if there's a beast, we'll hunt it down, we'll close in and beat and beat and beat, from 91. All right, so this shows what he's going to do. He's going to go confront his fears, but he's got them and he's going to go confront them, right? After that, you're going to have one or two, I like to call them reinforcing statements. A reinforcing statement goes and says, that again, that quote proves my point back here. My point was that Jack's afraid and he's got ways of dealing with it. That's what I'm going to remind you of in my reinforcing statement after the quote. Okay? Now that's if you're going to go with direct quotes, you can have that. But sometimes you go with an indirect quote. Essentially, the indirect quote is you take a quoted area or a part of the novel that you want, and you're going to put it in your own words, but afterwards you're going to put parentheses, and you're going to say, from this page on the book. Okay? And you can do either one, and we're going to go into those a little bit more in detail later. But you don't usually with those, when you're doing summarizing and stuff, you still have to have these reinforcing sentences, and you still have to have the topic sentences that introduce the idea. The only other thing you're going to probably have in a body paragraph is transition sentences. If you're going to transition to the end of the paragraph and then you're going to go to a new idea, or if you're going to transition to another quote or another point and then another quote. If you're going to transition to another quote, you're reinforcing the first point really, really strong because you got two quotes in a row that prove it. And if you're going to go transition to another quote that has a totally different point, we need to go to a new paragraph. Okay? But anyway, there's lots of examples of literary analysis papers that have got, here's what my main idea is, here is an example of it, this is a reinforcing sentence saying, remember, I told you so. Well, I did. I told you so. See, the quote proves it. And then a transition to move on to something else. Okay? As we go on to other parts of the paper, we're going to be looking at, we get down to, let's see, we got through the body paragraphs. Each one develops its specific part of the main argument. When we get to the conclusion, the conclusions are very specific. It depends upon what you're going to try to do. And we're going to see those, each individual piece, as we go to the other parts of the presentation slide. But this is basically the only things that you have in a literary analysis. We don't have I statements. We don't have I believe, I think, I feel, I this, I that. We're trying to say this is why it is, this is what happened. We're trying to be like a lawyer arguing a case. We're not saying I because we weren't involved. We're saying this is the way that it is, and we're trying to present our case. That's really the language that we use, and that's the tone, and that's the narration that we use. So moving on. So we ought to talk about opinion and fact. What is opinion? Okay, hold on a second. Missed it. Back to original. What is opinion? Let's see. There you go. That's what opinion is. Alright, that's opinion is just blah 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 blah. Okay, it's just somebody's mouth yammering like that, lips flapping senselessly and not really making a whole lot of sense, although that is kind of funny. That's opinion. Opinion is just, I think, I feel, statements like that when we're talking about literature. You've got to make an argument. And the way to make the argument is to say, the character felt this. Here's the proof from a quote. See, I told you so. Here, want more proof? The character also. Here's the quote. See, I told you so. Move on to next point. Okay? That's fact. When we get to fact, fact is from the book. Fact is the quotes. Fact is just the lines from it itself. Nobody can argue that the line's there. There's no question. That's fact. So what we need is we need evidence and we need facts in our papers when we are trying to write a lit analysis. We're trying to back it up with the actual lines or with a summary of what the line said and a page number. And that's what the citation is. You always are going to have to, all your strong evidence, all your main argument, the focus is going to be on that quote with that page number, and it tells me where to go if I want to go look at it, and I can go find it, and I can see what you're talking about. But for the most part, if you're quoting it exactly the same, there's no question. That's exactly what it says. And if you're summarizing it, you're saying, hey, go check me out if you want on that page, but that's what it says. That's the way to do it. Okay, so we want to put lots and lots of drawing back to the text. Things fall apart. If we're trying to prove that Okonkwo is not a meanie, we can't just say Okonkwo is not a meanie, because that's my opinion. And again, that's the flapping lips. It's just it's funny, but it's not. You don't have any literary clout. You didn't write the novel. You're not a literary analyst. So why should anybody believe your opinion? And that's the way that colleges treat everybody. They expect you to back it up with not your words, but with the text. If you can back it up with the text, you win the argument. So if you're going to say Okonkwo's not a meanie and he just represents his culture, just saying that, I know it, I read it, you know it, you read it, it doesn't matter what we both read, prove it. You have to cite evidence if that's what your point is going to be. I picked this because it wouldn't really interfere with anybody's thoughts that they would have regarding their own papers. This will not distract you from your own paper because it's not the same exact topic. Okonkwo's culture does not have a government would be one of my first arguments. If I'm going to try and show that he's not a meanie, he just represents his culture. The missionaries asked who the king of the village was when they showed up, but the villagers told them that there was no king. And then I actually picked the quote out right there where it happens. We have men of high title, and the chief priests and the elders. Achieve 124, and this is showing right now. This is all we have. We have people who have attained the highest title in the land because of ceremonies, because they've done great things and have been recognized as great things. And we have priests of the different gods and things like that. We have elders, the older people of the village. That's it. And you don't just call on Igwugwu. They choose to show up for certain things or not show up for certain things, but you don't call them, so you don't even have them. They are what, they show up when they show up. So all you're going to get is this. And that's what they're suggesting. We don't have a government that tells everybody you've got to be nice to each other and keeps one person from taking something from somebody else just because they want it, because they're bigger and badder and tougher, and that's the way that it is. Because there will be a certain amount of that, and there will be a certain amount of beating each other up and that kind of stuff in order to stay in check, because that is the government, the people themselves. Everybody's a cop, their own cop. With nobody enforcing the laws, cultural norms are very simple. The strong and aggressive will outperform the weak and meek, and thus gain power. So yeah, it's expected in a culture like that everybody's going to want to be strong and aggressive, because you end up becoming the big and the mighty. And yeah, when certain girls go after certain people, like Okonkwo's wife Akwefi, you fell in love with him because he was the most violent wrestler in the land. She knew she was going after a fighter, so yeah, she knows what she's gonna get. He's gonna be kind of a violent man. Yep, that's likely. Same thing happens today. They talk about people who marry boxers and MMA fighters and such. It's not always like that, but sometimes, you know, I mean, people, if they're fighters, they fight. That's what they do. So what are they going to be like? You know? So in this culture, that's in order to become very respected, you got to be a fighter. Okonkwo's got to do it. Here's another example. Another example that shows Okonkwo is not overly mean happens when Cielo comes to take Azinma to Siegbala. The next day, Okonkwo was also feeling tired and sleepy. Although nobody knew it, he had not slept at all last night. Alright, so this thing, it starts right here. Right here. From here down, this is an exact direct quote down to here. I typed it out of the book exactly and on purpose. But and if I was going to make it a direct quote, I'd have to weave it in there, like that. And you can't do that on a paper of our size because it's too big. You've got to use small quotes on the paper that's 2 pages long. Otherwise, people are going to say you're just using quotes to take up space, and they're gonna dock you. But if I needed a piece of that on a medium-sized paper, I don't need to quote it. This is my example of, you can do referencing, or you can do another term for it, informal quoting. I'm just going to summarize it, so to speak, in my own words, and then I'm going to still say where it came from. So Okonkwo was feeling tired and sleepy. I don't need the end sleepy. Although nobody knew it, he had not slept at all last night. I like that part because it shows that he's shook up about his daughter and he couldn't sleep, right? He had to stay up, right? So I like that part. He was very anxious but didn't show it. I like that part, but it's identical. He was very anxious but kept it hid. Kept it hidden. When Akwefi had followed the priestess, he had allowed what he regarded as a reasonable and manly interval to pass. So when he was following the priestess, he had to wait until he thought that, okay, that's long enough so I look like a tough guy who doesn't care that much. And then gone with his machete to the shrine. Okay, so he's got to pretend he's a tough guy. How much of this do I want to keep? When Akwefi had followed the priestess, he had allowed what he regarded as a reasonable and manly interval to pass, and then gone with his machete to the shrine. I'm going to cut it down. I don't think with his machete to the shrine is all that important. think when a when Aquefi followed the priestess, there's a better way to say it probably, but kept it hidden. When when following Aquefi, how about when checking up on Azinma? He allowed what he regarded as a reasonable and manly interval to pass. And then, let's see. But then went to the shrine, but it was only on his fourth trip that he found her, and by then he became gravely worried. See, I've changed it, and I've made it, it's still accurate, it's still what happened. I've chopped it down, and sometimes you'll do stuff like that. You'll put it in your own words, and then you'll just say, this is where it came from. Sometimes it could be just a small thought, you know, it could be something like, you know, Igwugwu show up when they want to, and then just put a page number where it says, you know, that they, something to that effect, that they only come and go, they're like the lords of the blah blah blah, and it describes all about them. You don't have to just make sure it comes from that page. Just make absolutely sure that you are not misciting, you get the right page. But okay, put it in your own words, which is referencing or doing indirect quoting is a very useful technique. People get sick of seeing quote after quote after quote. In fact, it looks kind of, I don't know, little young writer-ish to just do that style. It's better to have a mix where you've got some that are set up like this that you put in your own words, and then you've put the page number, and you've got others that are set up like this where you've got the actual quotes with page numbers proving your points, and then the reinforcing statements saying I told you so, the topic sentences saying what you're proving, and then, you know, the quote actually proving it, and then the reinforcing statement again saying I told you so is right. You know, it does prove that. Obviously it proves that. You say it just a little bit differently, and you make more points about, you know, in your I told you so. You don't literally go, I told you so. Although you might feel like it, you're not allowed to do that. So, and after that, we go into transition. And then are we going to another proof that proves the same point, or are we going to transition to another paragraph entirely where we make a different point that proves the main point of the paper? So that's how the quoting, direct and indirect, tend to work. And that about wraps up this particular episode of quoting and an informal quote. Types of conclusions. This is another one that you can think about. There's a lot of different types of conclusions that you can actually do. But they all, well, I won't say all, but a lot of them start off with the summary. We're going to summarize what basically happened. But here we go. There's different, let's see, we can do comparisons. This to that, this to that. Causation, this caused that, this caused that. There are, let's see, assessments like, you know, this is, therefore the overall is, the overall thing, the overall results are. There is recommendations. What would be the best thing to happen will be. There are predictions. In the future, what is more than likely possible, or what is likely to happen will be. Let's see. Just simple, straight out, you know, it just looks like this is the way that it is, which I would, instead of simple beliefs, I would call this summarily. I would just call this the summarize the argument kind of situation, because they don't mention that anywhere else. So I think that's really the one. Simple beliefs is the same as summarizing argument for me. The different degree of conclusion, you can go on to how for sure are we on it, and etc. And it goes on and on. So there's a lot of different types. What you want to do is you want to tie in to what extent do you feel that the ending is able to accomplish um, driving home the main message, or how significant is it, or you didn't like it, or you did like it, or stuff like that. I mean, you might put in just a little bit of that, but mainly sum up, and that would be the type of conclusion that I would recommend for this one.